All right, let's take a look and speak with Mish Schneider. Mish, nice to see you. MarketGauge.com, how are you?
I look kind of giant to myself here. It's great to see you, Nicole. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you as well. Look, we had an incredible run for stocks. We saw every single index hitting new highs, only to see some pullbacks now. Not dramatic pullbacks, but pullbacks nonetheless. I was just saying that the Nasdaq's down more than 3.5% this week. Some of your thoughts on what's going on here?
Well, I think that, first of all, I like to look at my economic modern family, and particularly the three inside U.S.-centric areas, which would be the Russells, the retail, and the transportation. So if we just isolate that, they started out, obviously, after the election very excited because the Trump policies are meant to be stimulating to the U.S. economy and more isolationist, if you will. And then this week, I think some disappointment has set in, but I don't think it's because of the potential for Trump policies, whether they work or not. I think it's more because of what Powell said, that he felt the economy was strong and they may not lower rates. And they're counting these areas, particularly the consumer, but all of them, counting on these lower rates. I feel at this point we're looking at disappointment, not necessarily total dismay, and we'll see what happens next week. But that's kind of where we're at right now, is euphoria, a little bit of disappointment, but let's hold support here and see what goes forth next week.
Yeah, understood. When we see what happens with an inflation, when you comb through that, you still saw pockets of inflation, for example, in shelter, right? That was one area. So do you expect the Fed to cut rates once or twice, December and January?
Well, I certainly would have loved to have been a fly on the wall if Trump called Powell after his press conference yesterday. And we did see a little bit more dovish talk from some of the other Fed members today. So there's a good chance. But remember that they lower in December, to finish my sentence. But remember, they're very data dependent. And that's what's really been Powell's thesis for the last 4 years, is what do the numbers say? So they're going to look at jobs. Well, we're not going to have a new jobs report really until the beginning of December. And they're going to look at these inflation numbers that came out, and then they're going to look at the PCE. And I think based on what they see right now, 0.25% will be very helpful to the market. But if they don't do it, how destructive will it be after they've already lowered 75 basis points? And I think that's why we're seeing that disappointment. It may not necessarily be, things are going to get out of control inflation-wise, and the Fed has to tighten more, but it may not necessarily be inflation's going to go much lower, and the Fed can be a little bit softer in terms of the rates. And that makes for a very difficult environment right now, which is what we're seeing.
So I want to hear some of your investments. I noticed, first off, I got to get to Ulta, a name that Buffett is peeling back on, is a name that you like today. I got to hear that. Why?
Well, I've liked the thin idea trade, the idea that, first of all, we need to have the consumer. So let me step back for a second. I think what's really going to drive this market as we get to the end of 2024 and into 2025 is going to be the consumer, right? And so we can divide the consumer into being obviously affected by inflation and interest rates, but then there's also that new thin consumer. And that's kind of where Ulta comes in. I don't know where they're going to be in terms of tariffs. Not really sure. I haven't kind of checked out where most of their cosmetics are made. But as a company, I think that we will see a return to self-improvement. And that's kind of why I like the stock, even though Buffett announcement drove it down. It immediately went from 362 up to 375, and now it's sitting around 370 today. If it can stabilize here, I still think it has upside.
Right, understood. Okay. How about some of the other things? When we're looking at gold and silver, for example, we see the dollar, a very strong dollar, and that pressures commodities. That pressures precious metals. Gold was at 2,800. Gold is now at 2,572. You still think that this can turn around? Why? What will be the catalyst for gold and silver?
Well, there's two reasons, right? One was the dollar. Obviously, that was a spectacular rally, and that affected the commodities, but also was the Bitcoin. So you had a lot of money and excitement move into Bitcoin. And, there's been this debate, Bitcoin versus gold, going on forever, and which I've always thought was kind of silly. But I think what here is going to happen with gold, we still have a tremendous global debt and debt in this country. We still have a tremendous amount of government spending. And like I said, inflation, we're seeing sort of pockets starting to pick up. If you look at the price of aluminum, for example, that's skyrocketed. Liquefied natural gas is starting to move up while oil is down. So it's really going to be a question of, does gold start to sniff a flight to safety again if things cannot get under control in terms of raw materials, debt, and spending as quickly as what Trump is promising. And it's a very lofty promise, so I assume that this 2,500, 2,600 level is a good consolidation place, and if it bounces up from there, there we go. But I also like silver even more, actually, because of its industrial and also because of its flight to safety. So let's watch the silver over $31 as well.
Yeah. Look, AI to the rescue for Alibaba. I mean, there were some, even though the sales missed expectations, the sales were still upbeat, some would say. I read that in one of the reports. So this is a name you like. It's beaten down today. I think it was about 10% lower today. November, 10% in November. It was down today, down about 2.3%. So some of your thoughts on the opportunities here of Alibaba, which right now is at $88. Where do you think this could go?
Well, this is another interesting stock, and the reaction was a bit surprising, I think, to a lot of investors. And by the way, tons of news came out over the last few days, Nicole, about people who were adding to their position in Alibaba, huge hedge funds like Ray Dalio and Michael Burry, for example, George Soros. So they're looking at something much further ahead than what we're seeing right now. And looking at the chart that you have up, obviously you can see we've just dipped into that major area of support around 87, 88. So from a chart perspective, again, I wouldn't necessarily want to see it break much lower from here. Clearly, China is having issues. We still believe that the stimulus is forthcoming. But if you can get back up over this 90 level, then you have a good opportunity to say, overdone, to the downside, will those hedge funds come in and buy more, and will China come in and really not only protect its economy, but even Alibaba investors come in and rebuy back its own stock, which they've also been doing. So yeah, it's volatile like everything else right now.
And when you're having conversations, cocktail parties, utopia versus dystopia theory, I'd like to have that because I'm going to a big party tonight. What should I be saying?
Oh, that's funny. Well, yeah, I mean, that's my poetic license, by the way. Let's just get that straight. I like to exaggerate a little bit in the writing. But essentially, that is exactly what we're talking about at cocktail parties, right? Is, clearly the country was very divided in this election, but yet we also heard Americans spoke that they're more concerned about the economy than many of the other issues that came up with Kamala, social liberties, for example. So with that said, people are very, very much into the fact that Trump can fix everything. And so you have to look at, will tariffs fix things in terms of increasing production in the U.S.? Will deportation increase things in terms of getting rid of crime or whatever, things that are being accused of immigrants? Will lowering taxes help with government spending and high inflation? Will reshoring really do it? Where's the labor going to come from? So the good part, the utopia, is all of that works out and things go crazy to the upside. And America has a great policy like Russia, which, by the way, has been very self-sufficient. Or does things not necessarily happen on the timetable? Deglobalization turns out to be not such a great idea, and our countries that are really very much hurt by this American strong dollar and forthcoming policy start to retaliate, not through guns, but through financial policy, like selling dollar, selling treasuries, BRICS, for example, cyber attacks. I mean, that's the utopia versus dystopia. This is a very exciting time in history. That's always a great way to start at a cocktail party. We're watching history unfold, and man, is it amazing.
And it's a deep conversation to have. I think I'm going to need a refill. Mish Schneider, marketgauge.com. Always wonderful to see you, and a happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. Thanks, Mish.
Same to
always.
you.